The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. The veteran's name is Jason Bradley. He was born on January 10th, 1977. He served in the United States Army during Operation Joint Guard Bosnia and Operation Enduring Freedom Afghanistan. He achieved the rank of captain. We're recording this on November 20th, 2013. I'm Jeff Fulton and I am conducting the interview, no relation. So Jason, can you tell me where you were born?
I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Okay. What are your parents' occupations?
My dad's a truck driver and my mom's unemployed.
Okay. And what about, do you have any brothers or sisters?
I've got one sister.
Okay. And what does your sister do?
I'm not sure. I think she's actually unemployed at the time now. Her husband works as a mechanic.
Okay. So you're born in Scranton, now you're down here in South Carolina. What brought you down to South Carolina?
When I got off active duty in 2000, I hired on with General Electric and they're based out of Greenville, South Carolina. I came here for a factory visit and met my ex-wife here, and we got married, had children. I basically made this my home and I've been here ever since then.
Okay. What did you do before you were interested in the military?
I was just in high school. I was a high school student. I joined the Army my senior year and left after graduation.
Okay. And what drew you into joining?
I just felt like where I grew up was limited in opportunity. It was an old coal mining town. Coal mining dried up, became a factory town. Factories were drying up. Most people there who earn a decent living are school teachers, prison guards, truck drivers. It just seemed like limited opportunity, and this was my way out of where I grew up.
Okay. And what did you enlist in?
I enlisted in the Army, aviation, in 1994.
Okay. So did you think about any of the other branches?
I considered the Air Force, but they wouldn't let you select your own job. You had to kind of take what they gave you after basic training. The Army would let you pick your position, and I wanted to find a career, something I could do after I got out of the military, and aviation seemed interesting, so they would guarantee that job, and that's the direction I went.
Okay, where did you do your basic training in AIT?
I went to Fort Jackson for basic training and Fort Eustis, Virginia for AIT.
Okay, and how do you think you were mentally prepared when you went to those?
I think so. I don't know if you can ever really be ready for basic training when you're 17 years old, but it was a wake-up call for sure, but I made it through and didn't really have much difficulty.
Okay. And take me through the steps after you finished your job training. You said you went active duty. Where were you stationed at originally?
Yeah, so I graduated AIT in the spring of 1995 and immediately got stationed in Germany, Katterbach, Germany. And so I worked there as an H-64 Apache crew chief. And from there, I was stationed there for 3 years. During that time I deployed to Bosnia and back to Germany.
Okay. Was there ever any time when you were in Germany where you felt threatened? I know that's a neutral zone for us, but...
Yeah, no, not at all. Germany's very, very friendly. So.
Okay. Now, when you went from Germany to Bosnia, what was your primary mission during that?
We were flying air cover during Operation Enduring Freedom, Joint Guard at that time in Bosnia. So a lot of the missions there were classified. One mission we provided air cover when the Pope came to visit, and then just general patrolling, trying to stay in the middle of the action there and keep the Serbs from attacking. So I think that was the primary mission there.
Okay. How did you keep yourself entertained when you were overseas in Bosnia in your off time?
We got there pretty early on, so there weren't barracks or anything. It was tents and tent cities in the mud. So it was a lot of spades and cards. But we stayed pretty busy. We went out early in the morning. We had to go out to the airfield, which was a little bit of a drive off the main base where I was stationed, Camp Comanche. We worked there all day and come back in the evening. So not a lot of downtime, really. Again, early stages, so we were still putting up towers and filling sandbags and those sorts of things.
So with being from a Germany duty station to go into Bosnia where there's little infrastructure for where you were staying, how did you adapt to that, going from what you knew to what you now had to adapt to, and the living conditions? And
Well, the good thing is when we were in Germany, the unit I was in, or a lot of the units at that time, we did 30-day rotations to Grafenwehr. So we would go 30 days, live in the field, sort of austere environment, living in tents and camouflage back then, and doing gunneries for the aircraft and ranges for the soldiers and qualifications. So we would do 30 days in, 30 days out, 30 days in, 30 days out. We were pretty accustomed to living out in the field. Obviously, there weren't 30-day breaks in between in Bosnia, but it really wasn't all that bad. I don't think in Bosnia we had hot meals. That was one of the first operations where we had contractors come in and do meals. At that time, it was brown and root instead of using military cooks. So we were fed very well. All the foreign forces used to eat our food. It was so good, but so it wasn't that bad.
So it sounds like you doing the 30 days on, 30 days off kind of got you ready for your possible Bosnian trip, which actually you went into.
Yeah, and we also sort of mobilized. Now you go through 90 to 180 day mobilization periods where we go and do all of our training before we go overseas to prepare us. We didn't do that back then, so we pretty much went straight out. So yeah, I'd say it was pretty helpful.
Okay. What was there anything that stood out to you while you were in Bosnia as far as missions or something that may have happened during that time frame to you?
We didn't take a whole lot of fire. We would just take, we'd have pop shots coming in here and there, and they'd throw Molotov cocktails over the wall, things like that. It wasn't overly dangerous other than the mines, so anytime we went outside the wire, we just had to be very careful to stay on the main roads, not wander off into the fields. The main missions that come to mind were that one where we flew air cover for the Pope, and I was on the down aircraft recovery team also at that time, where we flew with Black Hawks in formation with the Apaches, and we had some aircraft flying some wires, things like that. They would go down, we'd limp them along to the nearest NATO fob and go and fix them. So I've got some memories of doing that. I guess that's really what stood out, man.
Okay. What were your responsibilities as a crew chief?
We just had to make sure that the aircraft were always maintained. They were always ready to go. We keep them in go status or non-REDX status. So you've got your standard maintenance that comes up every so many flight hours that you'd have to do. And then you'd also have cracks and things you find on pre-maintenance or pre-mission checks and services. So we would fix up any work orders that were written up by other crew chiefs or by pilots or anybody who found any kind of issues with the aircraft.
Okay. When you finished in Bosnia, did you go back to Germany, or what happened from Bosnia?
Yeah, now if you deploy, you pretty much get stuck with that unit. You won't get PCS orders or change of station orders. Back then, if you got change of station orders, you would go back to your home station, even if it were mid-tour. In my case, we were almost complete with our tour, and we had to, I got my change of station orders, had to go back, out process, and then leave from Germany again. So it was right at the end of my Germany tour.
Okay. And how long were you in during this first term of enlistment?
6 years.
6 years. And you achieved the rank of sergeant, I understand?
Yes.
What was your reasoning for getting out from your first time?
When I got out the first time, I'd already finished about 3 years of college. I'd originally joined to get the skill set I needed to, build a career in the civilian world. So I felt like I had that, and I hired on with a company who hired me on as a full engineer, even though I'd only had 3 years of my engineering degree completed, and they would pay for my 4th year. So when I came up on my time, I had that opportunity and I took it.
Okay, and when did you actually get out during your first term?
2000.
So from 2000 till when, if you could walk me through what happened during that time frame?
So summer to fall of 2000, I got out. I went to work for General Electric. There was deregulation of power generation in the late 90s, and GE had just gone through a layoff about a year or two before that. So there was this huge explosion in the energy production market, and then they needed to hire on a lot of engineers. Well, I had 3 years of my 4 years done. I had turbine engine experience, military background. They liked that. They hired me. They said they'd pay for the rest of my school, and they did. So I immediately went to work with them as a full-on engineer. Went to school part-time, earned my bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from Imperial Aeronautical, and then I worked for GE for about 7 years, or about 6 years before I began attempting to go back into the military. I also finished my master's at that time, my MBA. So I went about 3 more years of school during that time frame, got married, had children, decided that now I could go back in as an officer, maybe make a difference that way. I could take advantage of the time that I already had, the active time, to build a better reserve retirement. And 9/11 happened, so of course there's patriotism there and my desire to contribute. When you add it all together, I decided to come back in the Army as an officer. I came back in 2008.
2008. When you came back in, you came back as an officer. What were some of the things that you had to do? Obviously, you had been out for several years, so I'm sure you had to get caught up in some training.
Yeah, I mean, they were really desperate for soldiers and officers at that time, so they started a direct commission program. Generally, if there were 2 ways to commission, you either go to ROTC in college, you get your commission that way, and then you go through your branch school to become infantry, engineer, armor, whatever it happens to be. So you go through ROTC and then your branch school, or your officer basic course. The other method is you go through OCS, where, basic training, officer candidate school, where they teach you some basic leadership and military history, how to conduct yourself as an officer. Then you go through your branching school. This was a third option, where if you had prior service experience, you had the education, the college education, and prior service leadership as an NCO, then you would go before a board, and if they felt you were up for it, they would go ahead and direct commission you and make you a second lieutenant, and you just go through your branching school, and that's the route that I took.
Okay. Nice. Going back towards your Bosnia time and your time in Germany, what were some of the awards that you received during that time frame?
Well, specifically for Bosnia, we got the Armed Forces Campaign Medal, I believe it is, the Joint Forces Service Medal, the NATO Medal, and I think I've got a couple of Army Achievement Medals during my time in Germany and Bosnia. And then I was stationed in Virginia for 3 years after that. Not sure, Good Conduct Medal. We got the National Defense Service Medal just for serving in that period, at that time frame. It was still the first Gulf War time frame. So we got the National Defense Service Medal, Army Service Ribbon, Overseas Service Ribbon. I think that about sums it up.
Okay. And now we're in your OCS time frame. How was that now going from enlisted to civilian, having your civilian experience at GE? Now you're back as an officer. How are you as far as your leadership around a bunch of other people who may not have that kind of broad horizon?
Yeah, I mean, I had military leadership as an NCO. I had military experience for that entire 6 years, so I was very familiar with how the military worked. Within General Electric, hiring on as an engineer, that's almost immediately project management leadership experience right there, managing multi-million-dollar projects and programs. So as far as stress of the job goes, I had some experience in the civilian side there. So I'd say the transition went pretty smoothly, especially when you're going to, in my case, it was just basic officer leadership course. I went through the infantry school and the engineer school, and I was there with a lot of 21 and 22-year-old recent college graduates who didn't really have military or civilian experience. So I'd say I definitely had an advantage.
Do you think your experience definitely helped? Were you standing out in your class with OBC, with your BNO?
Or BO with Bullock?
Yeah,
basic officer leadership course. Yes, mainly because of my engineering background. Now I'm an engineer officer, and I was going through the engineer officer course. The Army doesn't require you to have an engineering degree to be an officer in the engineer corps. So those of us who were engineers, there were a handful of us, 3 I believe, we had to do less studying, let's put it that way, when it comes to the mathematics associated with engineer, or being an Army engineer.
Okay. Now what did you, you said you went into the engineers, what unit did you go into at that point?
I had to find a unit to direct commission that would take me on and provide a paragraph and line number within their unit, so I went on with the 391st Engineer Battalion. headquarters company, but immediately moved out to the 323rd Engineer Company in Spartanburg, South Carolina, to be a platoon leader.
Okay. Now, what's your time frame from becoming a platoon leader to possible overseas?
Well, when I graduated the Basic Officer Leadership course at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, I immediately went through the Sapper Leader course for a month, completed that, came home for, I believe, 2 months, maybe 3 months, and then we immediately mobilized to Fort McCoy, Wisconsin to do our pre-mobilization training, which went from the end of January 2010 until, I believe, the beginning of June when we finally got on the plane to head overseas.
Could you tell me more about the Sapper Leader course?
Yeah, it's a month-long course where they basically sleep deprive you, starve you for the most part, put you through the most grueling physical and mental strains that they can in order to simulate combat without actually shooting at you or hurting you. You do anything from airborne operations, air assault operations, mountain climbing, rappelling, waterborne assaults. And just about anything you can think of to try to wear you down. Then they make you lead, and it's only those that can still lead under all that stress that graduate and get their tabs.
It sounds pretty intense. Is there a high attrition rate?
Yeah, it's I think on their website they might put up somewhere around a 50% graduation rate, but I think it's realistically on average probably about 1/3 graduation rate. We started with 40. 20 made it to the end, and 13 tabbed out of 40.
Wow. How many courses like that do they have every year?
I think they have 10 a year. I believe they have 10 a year. They don't do them in, I think it's December and January or January and February, just because the Lake of the Ozarks up in Missouri is too cold for them to do the waterborne operation safely without people dying.
Man, that sounds intense. So from Sapper Leader course, you got your unit, and now you're at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. What's your position throughout this whole thing?
All right, so I'm a platoon leader. I had a platoon of about 40 soldiers, and we were going to go do route clearance in Afghanistan. So go detect IEDs and reduce them so that other forces didn't run them over and explode.
What do you think your biggest challenge was when you came into the unit without knowing anyone?
I mean, I think for any lieutenant coming in as a platoon leader who's ultimately the head of a platoon who generally has little experience, the biggest challenge is always trying to find a way to maintain your power pedestal, so to speak, to be the leader that you're expected to be, but you also have to learn at that time because you don't have experience. In my case, it was a little bit easier because I was enlisted, I was an NCO before, a little bit of an easier transition, but earning the trust of the soldiers is probably the hardest thing you do as you come in as platoon leader. And that's part of the reason I chose to go to the Sapper Leader course, was to let everyone know that I would go above and beyond, that I've done the hardest thing the Army has to offer as an Army engineer, and I came out on top.
Okay. What were some of the challenges gearing up for Afghanistan up in Fort McCoy?
Fort McCoy, when we landed, was minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and Afghanistan was about 120 degrees Fahrenheit when we landed. So 100-degree difference, or 140-degree difference that actually is. It was very challenging to acclimate. But at Fort McCoy, I guess it was just laboring through the hundreds, possibly thousands of tasks that you have to check all the boxes in order to prove that you're ready to mobilize and you're properly trained to go and complete your mission.
All right, so you finished mobilization, and now you're leaving to go to Afghanistan. Are there any doubts or thoughts of not being ready enough, or not having enough training time before going overseas?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first time I'm deploying as a leader, in charge of an entire platoon who goes outside of the wire and has to operate autonomously, sometimes for days with little assistance or support. So there's a lot of unknowns. Never having done the job in combat, I only heard what my job would be. So a lot of speculation. So yeah, there's concern that, okay, am I going to be able to handle this? Am I going to make the right decisions when I have to? Hopefully, am I going to bring everybody home alive? All the responsibility within the platoon rests on me. So it's a burden to bear, and you just hope you do it right.
What were What was the time frame from when you actually got into country to when you started running missions?
Well, there was a bit of a debacle when we landed. We were supposed to land on one fob. We landed on another fob, and we had to catch an Air Force hop from one fob to the other. So there was a week or two delay where we would normally be doing inventories, taking over for the other platoon, doing left seat, right seat rides to get familiar with the territory, with their platoons actually out doing the work on patrol. So there's about a week and a half to 2 week delay before we hit the streets in Afghanistan or the dirt roads. And then we only had just a few days of missions with them before they had to leave the country because of that sort of screw up.
What was your thought process when it was all focused on you as far as you're now making 100% of the calls?
It was a little bit scary because, only being on one or two missions, and on those one or two missions with the other platoons, we took attacks. So now it's like I wasn't making those decisions. I was following orders. Now it's my turn to give the orders. So there was a lot of pressure there, and especially considering the first mission that I was on was a serious mission where a lot of casualties were taken, and we were actually stuck in an ambush zone for a long period of time. We came out on top. That was a confidence booster, but it's also worrisome because if the rest of the tour was going to be like that, I really was concerned whether or not we'd be able to bring everybody out alive.
What was the name of that operation that you were on?
It was Strong Eagle, Operation Strong Eagle.
And what was your mission during that time frame?
Mission was to clear a route that had not been used by any friendly forces. I think one scout platoon had gone out there and they'd taken contact about halfway down the route. At the end of the route was a town just on the Pakistan border, and they knew that the route was going to be heavily guarded, and the people in that town were not friendly. So there's a special forces mission to go in there, knock on the doors, bring everyone out, try to find the bad guys. But they knew going down that route there would probably be IEDs, and we would definitely take contact.
What if you could just kind of paint the picture for what the scene looked like going into this operation as far as the landscape and the temperature outside and everything?
Yeah, it was probably 120 degrees outside that day. We left early in the morning, so it was cooler, but it was still probably 90 degrees when we left at 2 o'clock in the morning maybe. Afghanistan, for those who haven't seen it, it's most of the roads and towns are in river valleys. There's very little water, a lot of high desert. So you're in the mountains and the rivers cut past through them, and that's where the towns and the roads and the people are. And I use the word road loosely, right? They're just dirt roads that barely fit cars sometimes. And we're taking these very large, heavy V-hull vehicles down the routes. So very hot, very narrow roads on a lot of times mountains on one side, cliffs on the other side, so your wheels are on the edge of the cliffs. And so as we went down the route, we got about halfway through as expected, took contact in the same place that those scouts took contact, and from there it's history, I guess.
And you said that you got pinned for several hours in the basically returning fire with the enemy?
Yeah, we were the lead mechanized element in the patrol. Obviously, we're trying to find the IEDs before the infantry hit them. In Afghanistan, at the time we were there, the infantry would roll, let's say, a squad of U.S. infantry with a platoon of Afghan infantry, or a platoon of Afghan infantry with a company of U.S. infantry. So they were dismounted on our left and right flanks, but we were the lead mechanized unit out in front of them. So when the contact came, we were out front. The infantry had to come down on the route in front of us a little bit because the route was constricted on the right flank. They started taking contact and heavy casualties, so we had to drive our vehicles out in front of them because there was really no cover for them. They were exposed on a hillside, being shot from the mountaintops, on the left flank. So we pulled out in front of them, and RPGs started coming in, and our lead vehicle got hit, but it wasn't disabled. But one of the trucks got shot through the transmission. It couldn't move. My truck's long range antenna got shot off, so I had no more communication with my higher up. So we couldn't move. Our vehicle was disabled. We're taking heavy contact. We had to casevac all the Afghan and U.S. casualties. My medic was treating them, dragging them out, and then we're running them back on litters. And then came the task of trying to recover the vehicles out of there because we can't leave our our V-hull trucks there, push them off the cliff to let the enemy figure out how thick they are so they can make their IEDs big enough to blow them up. So we had to basically defend our vehicles and defend our position for about 6 hours before the infantry was able to regroup and come back in and help us out. About that time is when we got our vehicles dragged out of the ambush kill zone.
How would you say your platoon reacted with that being such a short period of time after being in country to that kind of mission?
Really well. I'd say initially there was some hesitation because they're not quite sure, should they fire, should they not fire. We had friendly forces left and right flanks and out front taking casualties. So initially, maybe some of the front trucks were a little bit hesitant to just open fire and lay down suppressive fire because they weren't sure where the friendly forces were at that time. I had to sort of command it quite a few times to get suppressive fire out there. But once they did, everything was fine after that, I'd say. Escape hatches started popping open and people started throwing automatic weapons out on the roofs, and the rear trucks had grenade launchers. They were launching over the top of our patrol, and so I think they reacted really well, especially considering it was our first mission on our own out there.
Do you think that mission, that operation, do you think that helped your platoon and yourself for the entire tour?
Definitely. It certainly helped set in the fact that it was very dangerous, and if people weren't paying attention and doing their job, somebody was going to get killed. But it also gave us the confidence to know that we withstood. It was about 8 hours before we finally got out of that ambush site. So it was definitely a confidence booster that we could suppress the enemy. We could, give it back to them. We were prepared to fight. So.
Well, did you get any kind of decorations from that operation? It seems pretty wild of a operation.
I think we took about 28 soldiers on that mission from my platoon out of the 40, and I think virtually every one of them got some sort of an award out of that, just because we were laying down a suppressive fire. We did get all those wounded soldiers out. I think we did a lot of the right things, so I think 13 Valor Awards came out of that mission, which are Army Commendation Medals with V-Device for Valor and Heroism in Combat. I personally got a Bronze Star Medal with V-Device as well.
Okay, nice. So now you finished this operation. You said that you were fortunate and didn't have any casualties. Going forward, how many months were you in that same area?
I think we operated there for 3 or 4 months. Korangal Valley area of Afghanistan, pretty rough area, reaching up to the northernmost outpost on the Pakistan border, down to maybe 1/3 of the way down the Afghan-Pakistan border. And then we received a move order to move down to Kandahar to the desert areas. It was a surge going on in the mountains at that time where we were in that Korangal Valley. When that surge was complete, then they needed a route clearance mission to move south to Kandahar to support surge missions going out of Kandahar. So we sort of got a bad deal there where we went from one surge mission where we left there with a lot of our vehicles destroyed and soldiers recovering, into another situation where here are all your brand new vehicles and hopefully you've had enough time to recover. Now we're going to start the next surge mission. It wasn't ideal, to say the least.
Did you ever have days off? It sounds like you were in a pretty high mission tempo.
Not many. I would say, we probably went outside the wire 5 or 6 days a week on average, I'm guessing. We're supposed to have a few maintenance days a week because the vehicles, you take enemy contact, you're hitting IEDs and destroying vehicles, you've got to turn them in, get new ones. Just normal wear and tear on the vehicles. These roads are very rough and these vehicles are very heavy. So, they require a lot of maintenance, and we're supposed to have maintenance days, but a lot of times it was you're rolling out again, borrow a truck from the other platoon, you're going anyway. So it was 5 or 6 days a week we were outside the wire, I think.
And obviously it seems kind of high. Were you running more missions than other platoons within your company?
I think so. Some of the platoons had some issues where their vehicles weren't always up to par, and I don't know whether that's the fault of the platoons or the fault of the equipment or just the way things ended up. But I would say that my platoon, probably got selected for more missions than any other platoon, and typically the more difficult missions, because I think we were almost always ready by comparison to some of the other platoons.
And
Not
what would
to
you
take anything away from them, but
and what would you say about the morale of your soldiers during this time frame?
I think the morale was high. I mean, it's sort of a catch-22. You know, I think when we got selected for a lot of the special forces missions, the tougher surge missions, I'm not sure if it was because I had a sapper tab. When you're walking into a room full of Rangers and special forces guys, it doesn't hurt to have your combat engineer unit have sapper platoon leader. So I don't know if that was part of it. So I don't know if the guys, I know they were happy to have me as a leader. I don't think I ever really hesitated in my decision making, and everybody from my platoon made it back alive, and that can't be said for all the platoons. But I think they were also probably frustrated, because they're like, you know, it's a catch-22 for them. Like, okay, we've got a great guy, great leader. I'd like to think I am. I did a good job, at least I brought everybody home. But the catch-22 is we always got selected for the most and the worst missions, I guess you could put it that way.
During your limited downtime, did you do anything recreational or do any like team bonding exercises with the soldiers?
A lot of the guys had Xboxes. It's the 21st century now, right? So they would still bring them over there and link them together and play games against each other. So I had an Xbox, and I would do that occasionally. We always added on and built on to wherever we were staying. So we built on a giant covered porch between all of our hooches, and so we had our own little private area to play cards or do whatever the guys wanted to do. So I think we had really good team cohesion.
Okay. How long were you actually overseas on your second tour to Afghanistan?
I guess it was almost a year. It was just shy of a year.
Okay. And coming back to the States, how did you reintegrate with the civilian lifestyle?
It was definitely a change of pace. I had to go back to sitting behind a desk instead of running around like my hair was on fire. So it was tough. I was antsy, right? I would always have to get up and walk around. I just couldn't sit there all day. But, you know, coming back to family life, obviously, there's responsibility there. And it's just a completely different world, you know. But, I mean, I'm here, I'm okay. I'm sure everybody goes through their transitions.
What's something that, and maybe an experience that you had overseas, has there been anything from your time in the leadership role that has helped you civilian side?
Yeah, on the civilian side for my work and just life in general. I mean, you learn what's really important and what's really not. I mean, something that would have driven me crazy and you know, stressed me out maybe before I went is now so trivial by comparison to you know, some of the things you face over there. So you just learn to let a lot of things go, so to speak.
And do you still, you're still in the reserves, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you still keep in contact with a lot of the guys that you went overseas with?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think just like you see on TV or, you know, when you speak to veterans, you sort of build a bond there that, you know, will always be there. And I definitely keep in touch with a lot of my soldiers, or what used to be my soldiers, who used to be my soldiers. And they're more like friends now. They're not under my command anymore. So, you know, we speak as friends, I guess, and I enjoy that.
Okay. And would you say there's anything else that maybe you learned from your time or while you're overseas, or just your time in general? Any life lessons or anything else?
I mean, like I said, the main thing is just what's important and what's not. You know, you might argue with your boss or your wife over something very trivial, and now you come back and you just realize it's just not worth the argument. It's just not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. I mean, nobody's life is at risk. The wrong decision is not going to cost someone their life. So I guess I'm a little more stress-free than I used to be in my daily life.
And you're currently a captain, is that right?
Correct.
And what's your thought process on how long you're going to stay in the military?
I had a big break in service. I joined the Army 20 years ago, but I've only got, you know, maybe 13 or 14 years of good years of service toward retirement. You know, by the time I actually do reach a number of good years for retirement, it'll be 25 or 30 years since I originally joined. So I don't really have aspirations of making the rank of general. Currently, I just think I'd like to I'm finishing up a command right now, which takes a lot of my personal time, and it's a lot of hours you put in, and it takes its toll on my civilian career and my family. So when this is over, I'll ride staff for a little bit. I'll make major soon, hopefully make lieutenant colonel, and then I guess my aspiration is to make lieutenant colonel before I retire.
Okay. Well, Jason, I appreciate you knocking out this interview for us, and thanks for your service.
No problem. Thanks.